Okay, so I would like to welcome those folks online to the GeoSide event organized by the GeoValue community and entitled, Is There Really Value in Earth Observation? I'm Françoise Perlman, and I have been involved with GeoValue for close to 10 years. And can you go to the next chart, please? I don't see my charts. Craig? I don't see my charts.
Hi, Craig. Are you still there? I know you've disappeared from the stage. We need the slides.
Yep.
There we go.
Ah, great. Thank you. You can go to the next chart, please. Okay. So we are talking about GeoValue. And what is GeoValue? Who is involved and to do what? So talking about the vision, GeoValue is a community. It's a multidisciplinary international community. And the operative terms are pursuing trustable and evidence-based methodologies in the assessment of the use value of Earth observation. Looking at the vision, that's what I just talked about. Also looking at the mission, the operative terms is a capacity including technically valid methods and resources to enable wide accepted and broadly adopted assessment of Earth observation. And when we look at those, we basically have a framework which put together a number of resources, such as case studies, community accepted methodologies, peer-reviewed publications, and a repository. Next chart, please. Okay, so we are talking about the value of Earth observation to society. And we are talking about the resources that are available. I'm going to talk about the workshops that have been run over the last couple of years, and I'll also talk about publications. And then later on, other folks will address the rest of the items. Next chart, please. Talking about workshops, we've been having a sequence of workshops pretty much every year and a half until the occurrence of COVID-19. An example is a workshop in Washington, D.C. in October 2017, which was held in conjunction with the GEO plenary of that year. Also, we've had a workshop on advancing the understanding and measurement of the societal benefits of Earth observation, hosted by ESA in 2019, and a side event to the GEO Week plenary in Canberra in November 2019, talking about the value of Earth observation. Since then, although originally we intended to have a workshop hosted by the Canadian Space Agency, that was replaced by a webinar which was held in January of this year, and exploring how Earth observation data is supporting COVID-related public health efforts. So that gives you a feeling for the activities, workshop, and key meetings that we have been holding. Next chart, please. Publications. Another opportunity to publish is through a special issue. And we have a special issue of Frontiers in Environmental Science in the journal. And in theory, the article submission was going to be held until October of this year, but it's going to be extended to a later date. There is a list of the editors here, and Emily Pendili from USGS is the lead editor. Next chart, please. We have under the GeoValue a group of folks varying between 20 and 50, depending on the year. And we are looking for opportunities for people to get involved. And the opportunities are at various levels. For example, we have a planning committee that organizes workshops, webinars, and other events. We have members who are doing other things like working in working groups, working in workshops, and other activities like the planner, anyway, and participants who are just attending events. So you're welcome to let us know if you are interested in either of those. Next chart. This is a calendar of events for this side events. And after I'm finished, I'm going to introduce Krista Schraub, who is going to talk from USGS, and then a number of other folks talking about valuables, talking about sentinel benefit studies, and also talking about a working group in the first session. In the second session, is going to be a panel of space programs folks. So at this point, I'm going to step back and leave the speaker opportunity to Krista. Thank you.
Thank you, Francoise. Craig, do you have the slides, the societal benefit repository?
Craig is showing the slides. Craig? Hello, Craig. There we go.
Thanks, Craig. Do you have the separate presentation?
No, I wasn't sent the longer presentation. So if
Okay.
do you want to share the screen from your end?
Yeah, I can do that. Give me 1 second. Not sure it's gonna let me pull it up here. Try one more time.
We're all switching between all these different platforms, and everyone's different, and sometimes it's difficult to master them.
If this doesn't work in a second, I can just talk about it. But let me try one more time here.
I can try and display the slides for you, Krista. I think I can get this fairly rapidly.
Okay, yeah, if you can do that, Alessandra, that'd be great. It's not recognizing it on my side for some reason.
Okay, so let me check how far this is working.
Ah, perfect.
How does it sound?
It looks good to me.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about one of the activities that the GeoValue group has been working on, and that's the development of a societal benefits repository. Next slide. So I think some initial conversation or some identification of a need for this repository happened during that 2019 meeting that Francoise was talking about. And basically kind of this acknowledgement that, you know, there is a body of knowledge on the social, economic, and societal impacts of EO, but it's somewhat fragmented. Different groups have different documents, and we just realized that it would be great to kind of have this one location to go and find all of these resources. Okay. We also had some U.S. national support for it. It was identified as a need in the 2019 National Plan for Civil Earth Observations. So we have presented this to USGEO and have received additional support and interest in making sure that we also meet the goal within this plan. Okay. So we have a working group. This group had been meeting about 2 times a month for a little over a year. And we all have different disciplines, different locations, different agencies. And so it was a really good team that formed because we were not just using sort of one view on how to develop the repository. Okay. And then, of course, there's the larger GeoValue leadership team. It's important to note that throughout the process of working on the repository, we kept bringing information back to this leadership team, mainly related to the actual metadata categories. So received even more input on that outside of our working group. Okay. So we have a wide sort of ranging intended audience, researchers, decision makers, policymakers, physical scientists, economists. We developed the metadata categories around the thought that we're hoping a wide group of individuals would be using this resource. The general public, people that are maybe just coming to look at some sort of application of EO and related to value. So yeah, our focus was hopefully as broad as possible. Okay. Metadata categories, like I mentioned, the main kind of initial goal of the working group was to look at these different categories and define them. We have a lot of sort of those general ones you would normally expect to see, like author and institution. We wanted to add kind of the funding mechanism and support, just to provide information and opportunities for people that might come and find an article and may be interested in looking for funding for their own study. Of course, we have these Earth observation metadata categories, societal benefits, your SDGs, your International Standard for Industrial Classification. When possible, we tried to use any sort of international standard for these categories. We have these functional categories. There are a couple of members of our working group that thought it was really important if someone wants to come in and look at more of an application area of EO, and then of course valuation for economic approach, type of value, and a whole suite of categories under that too. Okay. We have a beta version of this in development. We're hosting this on this interagency human dimensions government site. So the site has a long history, has a sustainable future, and has a lot of other sort of human dimension teams on the site. So it seemed like a good fit for kind of broadening our outreach and having a kind of a sustainable future. Okay. This is just a brief example of the beta version. So you can see you have your categories on the left. If you select something like impact analysis, there are potentially these articles that pop up. We just have a couple example articles in there. And then if you would select on one of those articles, you can see that right image is what it would look like as it pops out. Again, beta version, so we're still working on kind of how this would look, but you can get the idea of what we're hoping to do. Okay. We're hoping to keep that working group together even as the repository is developed, to continue to monitor and do testing as articles come in, evaluate documents. We're working on hiring someone to help with that ingest. It's really important for us to make sure we have long-term support for this, not just to keep it up and running, but to keep communication and feedback and outreach going on the repository so it doesn't become a stagnant site. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks, Alessandra.
You're welcome. I just need to. Okay. Okay, I think that now the floor. I don't know, Krista, you have finished your presentation?
Correct.
So I think the floor should now be to Yusuke to tell us something about the Valuables Consortium. Yusuke, you said you would share your slides yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, let me share my screen. And okay. Okay, is that full screen slide?
Not full screen.
Oh,
It looks like it's in presenter mode.
Yeah, that's perfect.
there. Okay, great. All right. Thank you for having me at this side event. My name is Yusuke Kuwayama. I'm the director of the Valuables Consortium. I am also an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And today I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about valuables, what our activities and products are, and try to put this activity in the context of all of the other important work that GeoValue does to quantify the value, characterize and quantify the value of Earth observations. So just very briefly, the Valuables Consortium exists thanks to the generous support of NASA. It is a cooperative agreement between NASA and Resources for the Future, which is a research think tank based in Washington, D.C. And the generosity of NASA comes not just through funding, but through making available a lot of their scientists and staff to make sure that the work that we do in terms of quantifying the socioeconomic benefits of Earth observations is relevant to NASA, as well as the broader Earth observations community. So how does our initiative relate to other important work that is being done in this area, including the other initiatives within GeoValue? So first, this initiative is somewhat unique in that it is a large, sustained effort. So large in terms of the number of activities, the number of studies, the number of individuals involved. and sustained in the sense that it has a 5-year work plan. We're approaching the end of the 5th year, and we are also fortunate to have been granted an extension from NASA to continue work for another 6 months, in particular to make up for some lost time due to the pandemic. In addition to the large and sustained nature of this project, we think it is unique in that it focuses on the quantification of benefits specifically. So going beyond just the identification of benefits, socioeconomic benefits, and try to actually quantify them using metrics, often in dollars or other equivalent monetary terms. And then we focus on metrics that represents what we refer to as socioeconomically meaningful benefits. And these are metrics such as lives saved, increases in profits to firms, or crop yields to the agricultural sector. So while other measures of benefits are important and should be addressed by this community, the Valuables Consortium specifically focuses on these metrics that are tied to socioeconomic outcomes. As was mentioned earlier, the 2 areas that we focus on are to conduct impact assessments. So we could think of this as the research part of the project. And this involves basically producing and publishing studies that quantify the benefits of Earth observations in specific decision contexts. And in addition to that, we have a robust capacity building and community building initiative that develops educational materials, activities, events to build capacity within the earth science community and build connections across interested parties within the community, again, to focus on this role of quantification of benefits. The consortium is structured as follows. So there's a core team made up of RFF and NASA researchers and experts, a scientific council consisting of a diverse and interdisciplinary group of earth and social scientists engaging in earth impact assessment activities, and they advise and serve as advocates for the consortium and in the communities that they represent. Then we have consortium members, our current consortium members shown here on the right-hand side of the slide. And these are organizations that have expressed interest and pursue activities and valuing societal benefits, and they have formally requested to join the consortium. I am happy to have anyone attending this program here that represents an organization that might be interested in joining the consortium. I'd be happy to talk to them about what's involved. And then finally, the other really important group of this consortium is the community of practice. And this is a large group of individuals, again, interdisciplinary community that shares a common language and is prepared to conduct value of information impact assessments associated with Earth observations. And just a little bit about this community. Here on the right-hand side of the slide, we have a simple depiction of what this community currently looks like based on information that was submitted by community members when they signed on to receive email updates from the consortium. As you can see, I'm not going to get this into much detail, but I'd just like to highlight how diverse this our community of practice is. And in particular, looking at this lower pie chart here, that there's a good chunk of social scientists and other types of experts involved in addition to earth science. And we believe that one of the successes of this consortium has been to bring a larger group of social scientists and non-earth science experts to the discussion about the socioeconomic benefits of Earth observations. Here on the left-hand side is just a sample of what we believe is one of the most important capacity building outputs of our project. It is our explainer series. We call it the Value of Science Explainer Series, and it serves as a tutorial, almost like a brief textbook of sorts that introduces the community to the consortium's approach for quantifying the value of the socioeconomic benefits of Earth observations. And so these are the first 7 shown here. We actually have published 2 more since I prepared this slide. They're all available on our the website for the consortium, and the link for that will be on the last slide before I wrap up. As I mentioned, an important output of this project are these impact assessments, and we do strive as a consortium to get these impact assessments published in the peer-reviewed academic literature. So here are some examples of papers that have been published in journals, and some that are currently in working paper form and are currently in the process of being submitted or are currently going through the peer review process. We believe that it is helpful to get these impact assessments published in peer-reviewed outlets because it builds credibility across different disciplines that need to be involved in the process of socioeconomic benefits quantification. And it just makes these results easier to share with a broader set of individuals who are interested. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming. So Valuables put forth a grant program of its own, a small grant program in which it requested to the community proposals for studies to quantify the impacts of satellite information on socioeconomic outcomes. And we were pleased to receive over 60 proposals as part of this competition. We were able to award 3, but because some of the other proposals that ultimately weren't the ones that received the 3 awards, that's all we were able to fund with the resources we had. But we saw so many other great proposals come in through this competition that we were able to fund at a smaller award amount some additional studies here that you see on the left-hand side, and also we're able to work with NASA to kind of separately try to support these studies as well. So we're really excited about these studies because they cover a range of application areas that we haven't been able to address through some of the core valuable studies, these that I was showing you here. But in addition, they represent over a dozen institutions. So the experts leading these studies are based in over a dozen institutions. And so we're really pleased to have been able to bring in these experts who have the expertise and the tools to conduct socioeconomic benefits quantification of satellite information and Earth observations more broadly, but until now weren't part of this community that is focused on valuing this kind of information. And so we hope that this is sort of a lasting legacy of the consortium where this community has been, this community that is interested and is able to collaborate on these types of studies has grown. I just wanted to wrap up with advertising the next Valuables Community of Practice meeting, which is coming up in mid-December. This Community of Practice meeting will actually feature some of the preliminary results from these research projects, these external research projects that I just mentioned. And so if you're not yet on the Valuables email list receiving these announcements, you can sign up going to our website, www.rff.org/valuables. You can follow us on Twitter. All of our events are announced there as well. And I'm also happy to receive emails or inquiries directly. So I hope I didn't go too much over time. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Yosuke. I think we said that we will finish the session with the presentations, and then we will have some time for question and answers. So I shall now leave the floor to Jeff Sawyer. And maybe Craig, you can put on the slides.
Thank you, Alessandra. There's just one slide, Craig, which summarizes everything, and the video in due course.
Okay, so was the slide was in the
Slides in
overall?
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a second here.
I hope so, anyway.
Yeah, it is. Just a second here.
So whilst we're getting the slide up, so I'm Jeff Sawyer. I'm strategic advisor to ERSC. I was the Secretary General of ERSC until the middle of last year when I took a sort of early retirement. Then my wife keeps asking me when I'm going to stop, especially with these workshops. So we're running what's called the Sentinel Benefits Study, or SEBS. This is a contract. We're under contract from ESA. Alessandra is the project officer within ESA, and the funding comes from the European Commission. And we're looking at assessing the value of the use of data coming from the Sentinel satellites, hence the title Sentinel Benefit Study. So our overall objective is to understand the value coming from Sentinel satellites, as I say. Our work has two main parts to it. The core of the work are a sequence of case analyses where we take a good example of the use of data coming from one or more of the Sentinel satellites and analyze the benefits that it's delivering, as I will explain in a moment. The second part of the work are cross-cutting analyses, which have become increasingly important as we've gone on through the work and as we've built up a portfolio of cases, enabling us to compare and contrast and develop some much deeper insights as to what's going on with the use of data. So I always say Copernicus was decided with a series of cost-benefit analyses, which were top-down and very large scale and very broad brush. And I was happy that the politicians bought those arguments, but I would not have done so. And so we initiated this bottom-up work with ESA and the Commission, where we take a single product or service and analyze the impact it has along a clear value chain. So we start off with the service provider. We identify a primary user who is a key player in this process, and then who is benefiting from the work the primary user is doing, and then what impact that's having on society. So this is the structure of our work. Bottom up with a well-defined product or service and a clear value chain. Within the work, we've identified over 250 potential cases, and so far we've analyzed 24 of them, but we have more in the pipeline. So this is it's very important the cases we choose. Obviously, we filter for the use of Sentinel data, so it's very important that Sentinel data is being used. Secondly, it's important that it's operational, so the user is using the data in an operational way, and it's not purely R&D. And this is important because it helps understand what's going on in the value chain. And then the third critical part is that the user is committed to supporting the work. And this includes the hierarchy, because we've had a number of cases where individuals are very keen, but then their hierarchy are not so keen. And so we have to, we try to make sure right at the beginning that there is full support for the work. This also leads to an insight, because what we're finding is that the use of the data is really quite impressive, but it's in parts of organizations. It's not right across an organization. And so there is a real need to institutionalize the use of Earth observation in many organizations. Now, last week we had a big workshop, an important workshop, where we presented our results. The study will shortly come to an end, but we've got an extension. I was happy to hear that Valuables has as well. So we have an extension to carry on and produce more cases. So that will lead us to develop further. Last week we presented 16 full and 8 short cases, and we had 3 panels looking at some of the cross-cutting issues. One of the things I was most impressed with that workshop was the engagement of users. So where we'd had primary users in the case, some were a few years ago, but they still came along to the workshop and engaged and reported that they found it really interesting. So the second thing that we've, or one of the key things we've also done, is move beyond monetary benefits. We started off doing this work looking at the numbers. Everyone's interested in the numbers, but now we analyze across 6 dimensions. So which you see on the screen: the economic dimension, the environmental dimension, the entrepreneur dimension, the regulatory dimension, the science or research, and societal. And this enables us to also to go deeper into the cross-cutting analyses. So 4 in particular were reported in the workshop on the academic uses, looking at the entrepreneurship, so the contribution to startups and the business community, environmental aspects, and societal impacts. But I think we've all found, and this came out very strongly in the Frascati workshop, that communicating is really, really important. It's great doing the studies, but if we don't communicate and inform the right people through outreach activities, then it's really lost. So we really put quite a lot of effort into storytelling. Now, as part of the workshop, we produced some videos to summarize each of the cases. And I'd like to just give you an example of one of those now. So, Craig, if you can run the video. Data from the Sentinel-2 and Sentinel-3 satellites are used to monitor water bodies in the region of Baden-Württemberg in the south of Germany. The region has more than 1,300 water bodies, including 260 which are over 10 hectares in size. But only a very limited number of these can be tested in the accepted traditional way. Further, the largest lake, Lake Constance, is tested in several places, but this still only provides a partial picture. EOMAP, a German SME, has developed a service, EOlytics, which uses the freely available data from Sentinel-2 and Sentinel-3 to measure indicators of water quality. LUBW, the Baden-Württemberg State Institute for the Environment, subscribes to the EOlytics service. This lets LUBW measure many more of their lakes, much more often, and with many more sample points. District councils in the region use the information to inform their citizens about the quality of the lake water, so helping them plan their leisure activities to avoid the risk of entering water polluted with a harmful algal bloom. Water companies and districts use the information to help manage risk and plan water samples and testing. The economic benefits are estimated at 4 to 8 million euros per annum, but more importantly, Copernicus allows the LUBW and other regional agencies in Germany to provide a better service for their citizens for a moderate cost, helping to reduce exposure to harmful algae whilst improving the environment, reducing pollution and helping nature conservation. Thanks, Craig. So there are 14 of those videos illustrating cases that we've studied, full cases. If they're not available, they will shortly be available on the SEBS website, so you can access all of them. So the second part of the work is around the cross-cutting analyses, and the portfolio has allowed these, and these are particularly fruitful. So we've looked at the presentations on public authorities, non-monetary benefits, which we find are often more important than the monetary ones. So the ability to serve their community, platforms for cooperation internally and with outside agencies, and other of these transversal benefits. So we're looking to extend this work over the coming months. We welcome cooperation with more people. We work with GeoValue, and we shall be continuing the work with the focus on specific topics, which we shall be identifying, and happy to discuss this further with anyone who's interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I would ask Craig to put on again the slides for the last topic in this presentation session, which builds in fact on what Jeff just said.
Is Gustavo's presentation?
No, it's the same that you were showing before, but just right after where you stopped, before showing the video.
Okay, I will put it up now then.
Thank you. Meanwhile, I just introduce myself. My name is Alessandra Tassa from the European Space Agency, and I have just one slide which I will present. I will try to be quick because we have an exciting panel coming ahead, and I don't want to steal time. So the next slide, please. Thank you, Craig. You can go to the next slide.
Oops.
So I just wanted to spend a
Whoop.
few words.
There.
Yes, that is the one. So just to highlight that one of the activities within GeoValue, we are also, we set up a working group which was dedicated on discussing about non-monetary benefits. The idea stems from the fact that, well, from what Jeff briefly mentioned, that people is always very interested to get the monetary value, and probably with enough time and resources, you could monetize everything. But the experience shows that there are many so-called soft benefits that are very difficult to monetize. And I think that the reality is that whenever you go and for monetization, there are many of these soft benefits that come almost unperceived. So the idea is that if you really try to focus on one benefit area at a time, you will be somehow forced to look at these soft benefits, even if you cannot monetize them. And with the work that Jeff and his team did in SEBS specifically, I was impressed by the fact that when you are forced to focus on these, let's say, soft benefits, well, you really find out that there are many that would have gone unnoticed. So these soft benefits sometimes have become almost the core of some of the studies, especially when the user is a public authority. So the idea is to try and figure out what is the status of the art in this assessment of non-monetary benefits, and if it's possible to find out a possible framework, a structured way of measuring at least or assessing from a qualitative point of view these non-monetary benefits. So we created the working group within GeoValue. You see the members, the full list of the members in the frame on the bottom left. It's unfortunate, it's an orphan list because we have lost in the last period a couple of members and even the chair. So we are kind of reorganizing ourselves. But the experience was that it was quite beneficial, and so we are looking at revamping the dedicated meetings, and we will try to find a formula that can fit all the members. And we are really open to hear, to have external interested parties. So whoever is interested should contact us, and we would be really happy to engage in discussions around this. And with this, you can put down the slides, Craig, and I think we ended our presentation. We should have allow a couple of minutes for questions, if there were questions, quick ones from the audience or from the other speakers. I do not see any question. I do not see any. So anyhow, in case, just post them in the chat, and maybe the speakers can answer also on the chat. And without losing any time, I would I would hand over the floor to Jeff Sawyer, who will moderate a panel. But Jeff, I'll leave you to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Alessandra. So today we're really, really pleased to have quite an impressive panel of representatives from different space agencies and different space organizations around the world. Our goal is to try to understand a little bit more about what space agencies' needs are in terms of information to demonstrate the value of Earth observations. And so I'm very pleased to welcome onto the panel Lawrence Friedel from NASA, who's director of the NASA Earth Sciences Division, the Applied Sciences program within that division. Gustavo Henriquez from CONIDA, who's head of international cooperation at the Peruvian Space Agency. James Jarvis from the Canadian Space Agency, who's a research analyst on the Economic Research and Analysis team. Osamu Archie from JAXA, who is a senior engineer working in the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. Mari Bota from CSIR, the Council for Scientific and Industry Research in South Africa, where she's the manager for the Industry Connect program. Krista Straub from the USGS, who's a social scientist in the National Land Imaging Program and the Social and Economic Analysis branch. And Alessandra Tassa, who is a technical officer in the Earth Observation Directorate at the European Space Agency. I don't know, we don't have the slides. Let me just read out. All the panelists have had 4 questions which we're going to address. And if I could ask each of the panelists in turn, firstly, to describe what are the main activities of your agency regarding the production, distribution, and or use of data coming from the Earth observation satellites. What are the objectives and who are the key stakeholders? And then, do you have any activities which seek to measure and or demonstrate the value of the data for your stakeholders? So if I could turn to each of the panelists in turn to address those first 2 questions. So Lawrence, perhaps you could kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, very much. And so NASA has, I think right now, about 23 satellites and sensors that are collecting information globally about the Earth and the Earth system. It has grown, from the start in several decades ago. It has been very focused on supporting the research community, and it's really been in the last 10 to 20 years when recognizing that the value of this information for the decision-making community. And so this has really been a strong effort to help get beyond the research community and really get into supporting the decision-making communities. And so I would say that as the key area, we're still trying to figure it out as we're helping to sort of broaden the organizations and help build capacity of organizations, both domestically in the US as well as internationally, on how they can be using Earth observations to support decision-making in a range of different cases. And that's both for public and private sector. In terms of what we're doing to support the social and economic value related to it, you heard Yusuke earlier talk about the investment that we made with Resources for the Future to support efforts in developing publishable studies, as well as helping to build a community of people to do this sort of work. And part of that is helping to make the connections between people who are on the earth science, the physical and natural sciences, with the social scientists, whether they're economists or other types of social scientists, and to provide the funding and the incentives for them to work on this activity. I would say that when we look at talking about the benefits of Earth observations in decision-making, I would say that the efforts to show the socioeconomic benefits, I would say it's critical to that value proposition. And I would also sort of say that in an era where we're seeing a lot of alternative facts, misinformation going around in the world, that I would say that showing the value of scientific-based information in decision-making and evidence-based decision-making, and articulating the economic and social benefits from using that science and technology for improved decision-making, I would say is even more important than it's ever been. So I want to say congratulations to GEO. It's come a long way in doing this work. There's still lots that we can do to improve. And I'm looking forward to the other perspectives on the panel and to maybe follow up on some other items in terms of some challenges later in the panel. So back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Lawrence. So to address the same two questions, Gustavo?
Oh, yes, thank you, Jeff. Okay, thank you everybody and to attend this side event. My name is Gustavo Enriquez, as Jeff nice introduced me.
You
Peru.
had some slides. Did you wish to show one or two slides, or?
Yes, I will share some slides now.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so you are seeing the slides right now. Right. Okay, so as I mentioned, Peru is really a newcomer in space infrastructure in orbit. Even when Peruvian Space Agency was established back in 1974, it's not until 2016 when Perusat-1 satellite system was launched, put into operation, and is the first Peruvian space infrastructure in orbit. So this system was designed to provide satellite data free of charge to all the public institutions in Peru. Besides the technology part of the project, it also was performed a large communication campaign among many decision makers, also a large training campaign, and we set up all the data supply channel for the users. So right now we have the system operating for 5 years. We have made some statistics about the use of the data, and we are trying the users to report the use also, but we are very interested in the evaluation because we are still have not too many data about this, and we would like to develop our methodologies to get these values. So after that, I will show another slide, maybe in the next for the next question, Jeff. But for me, that is all. Thank you. I will let to share my screen now.
Do you have any experience to date in looking at methodologies for valuing of the data?
No, not yet. We know that we would like to, because we are interested to have this information mainly from the users. For example, we are interested to know if these economic benefits from the user are coming mainly from savings in comparison to traditional ways that they use to get similar information, or maybe in terms of the growth of their capabilities to deliver their own services to the people. And maybe also we would like to be interested to get data how this satellite system has impact the ways we are manage disasters in Peru and the way we are taking care of the environment. These are also our main concerns.
Okay, so I guess we're likely to come back to those subjects, but let me pass on now to James Jarvis from CSA. James.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And thank you so much for having me on this panel. To start with what the CSA is doing within this realm, I think really the flagship is the RadarSat Constellation mission, which is a trio of SAR satellites. And these contribute in a lot of different ways. So whether it is climate change and sea ice monitoring, disaster response and management, agriculture components for increasing crop yields. And so with that, the key stakeholders, and there are many, they include other government departments, and we work, of course, to meet the needs of Environment and Climate Change Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So there's many of those, as well as Canadian public at large, university researchers, etc. And recently, we've also been working, and this is kind of newer, but trying to identify benefits and impacts for gender-based analysis plus approaches. So looking at gender differentials of benefits and potential costs, and also looking at Indigenous communities and Northern communities, because a lot of these different missions focus as well significantly on the Arctic and on Inuit peoples as well. And so that is definitely a key focus more recently for us as well. With respect to measuring or demonstrating the kind of value, one of our biggest activities is the space sector report that we do publish every year. And we do send out a space sector survey to all the different institutions, companies, nonprofits, and universities in Canada that work in the space sector to try to measure that. So that, of course, does include Earth observation and provides that snapshot as to the value there, including in revenues and jobs. We do also have a performance indicator survey. And so this goes out for R&D funding that we send out to measure some of those similar metrics as well. And through some of this, we do communicate it through Space Sector Survey Report, for example, which is publicly available on our website to people to see some of the values here. I'd also mention that we also do have some external socioeconomic benefit research studies that we look at. And through those, that's also part of how we're pioneering and trying to see how that gender-based analysis plus may look as well. And those are done for various different Earth observation and sometimes proposed Earth observation missions. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Certainly interesting to understand a bit more about the gender-based analyses. I think that's quite unusual. In our surveys where we look at gender, we find the change is very, the situation is very, very static. And there are groups now of women in Copernicus and others where there's strong efforts to try to understand better. And I think it's something that we could well exchange further on. Okay, so let me move on. Osamu Achi from JAXA. The floor's yours.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. So my name is Osamu Achi from JAXA. Actually, I'm working for the Satellite Application and Operations Center in JAXA. And then according to our spacecraft satellite, we are now operating a 6 variety of the Earth observation satellite, monitoring for deforestation and forestry information, as well as the precipitations, and also the iceberg and the disaster monitoring and so on and so forth. So we have, as Lawrence and also James mentioned about, our space agency also monitoring Earth globally and locally, regionally, in the variety of the variables in monitoring for the Earth. And then our aiming, focusing on is climate change and environment change, as well as the disaster monitoring. And then for this, use of we have a lot of stakeholders like a mayor, government, cabinet offices. Particularly, that Japan is a variety of the disasters happening: earthquake, volcanic, and flood, and so on and so forth. And then we are strong link to the cabinet office to provide our space-based information for their actions, actually. And then our indicator to monitor how much to use for these satellite images to monitor about how much people are evacuated before happening for the more casualties to predict. And then for the climate monitoring, as you know, that we have a world first satellite for the monitoring of CO2 and methane of greenhouse gas monitoring satellite we call the GOSAT, which is monitoring the world global CO2 and methane. And then one of the big findings for the globally is that 2015, we have found about global CO2 concentration will be over 400 ppm, That is also the same with outcomes from the other measurements. So that, I think, stakeholders, international stakeholders, government level, intergovernment level, and the UN level, and local level, and so on and so forth. But we have not yet studied about societal benefit impact. We have, as James mentioned about, we have studied some sort of a small contact to the university to see how much socioeconomic impact can be derived from our space-based satellite data. But it's not it's a very intermediate way, and we will expect too much about how much our space-based variables to be interpreted to the societal impact, but we will expect too much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we were aware, and I was planning to comment on the the dedication to join at this time. And I'm impressed you have a clock in your in your vision to emphasize that it's 1 o'clock in the morning where you are. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a moment. So now perhaps I can call on Marie Botha. Marie is in CSIR in South Africa, where the time is a lot more convenient. Marie.
It's only dinner time. Then other people get to make dinner. Thank you for the opportunity. So we are, I'm from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa. We are not necessarily the supplier of the Earth observation data, but we work very closely with our South African National Space Agency. We serve a similar mandate in the National System of Innovation. So my colleague from SANSA is in fact on the call, Imran. We work extremely closely together. The space agency was actually set up by the CSIR 10 years ago. So the CSIR has been in existence for 75 years, and we then established and spun out the space agency. So if I answer the first question around the activities on Earth observation, satellites and data, I'm going to first talk a little bit about SANSA's mandate on that. And SANSA has been mandated to provide satellite data for government for meeting legislative mandates and provide information basis for decision making. Very similar to all space agencies. SANSA further develops and coordinates the government science system to leverage Earth observation. The SANSA develops EO value-added products produced across the system, and specifically to include industry. And lastly, they also develop and create industry participation opportunities in key South African Earth observation areas. Now, where the CSIR plays a similar role to the last point of SANSA is we would develop product platforms, in essence, based on Earth observation data. And I'm going to give you two examples as we develop the advanced fire information system that can predict wildfires through the use of Earth observation data. And then we are also busy with ocean monitoring through the utilization of Earth observation data. And this is all done with a national mandate in mind. When it comes to the second point of saying, looking at the activities that we've undertaken to measure and demonstrate value add for our stakeholders, and this is the reason why I'm talking rather than the space agency themselves, is we are currently busy with a macroeconomic, techno-economic study for our government to look at what is the economic case for space science and technology in South Africa. Now, the problem that we face is severely highlighted because our socioeconomic problems are quite deep. We've got severe poverty in the country and severe discrepancy. There's a huge gap between, the severe poor and the rich, and obviously, government funding then gets constrained, and we have to prove as a science community what it means to actually invest in space science and technology. So we are We're looking more on the softer, the societal benefits, because that can prove to government what it would mean why it is important to keep on investing in space science and technology. So we are currently looking at a bit of the downstream function of the economic case for space science and technology. It's more on, Jeff, like your ERSC type of work that you guys are conducting. Our problem is that we don't have baseline data. This is a first that we've done. So that is a huge constraint for us. And with the population of this project, we hope to hand this over to government and the space agency and let this serve as a baseline. And then because another huge problem that we faced is it's difficult for us to quantify what our desired future end state would be. We find it difficult to quantify what that would mean for society today. So an element that we have actually started doing on this project is we built roadmaps, technology roadmaps for three of the thematic areas: Earth observation, satellite communication, and GNSS. But again, for us, Earth observation is the most important. So we build a vision and a desired future end state, and then retrospectively in that look at what it would mean for technology, what it would mean for human capital, what it would mean for products and legislation. So that has also been very well received, and I must say it helped us quite a lot in this piece of work that we have been undertaking. Yeah, so this is in essence a decision support tool for government, again, just to motivate how our society, with its unique set of problems, can benefit from us investing into space science and technology.
Thank you very much, Marie. You raise a really interesting point there about establishing a baseline. I mean, one of the challenges, I think, of our technology is it's so broad in application.
Yeah.
So drawing a boundary around that in order to establish a baseline is it's a real challenge, I think. So
yeah, Jeff, the timelines of this project has moved on, and how long is a piece of string? But yes. It is the problem. It is the problem about the baseline.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, maybe we'll come back to that. I see Lawrence has posted a comment as well about it. But before going off into the different discussions, let me now give the floor to Krista to explain the USGS perspective on all this. Krista.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm, I guess, a little bit of a different person. I'm actually a social scientist with the U.S. Geological Survey. So I'm based in the Fort Collins Science Center, which is where the social and economic analysis branch is. But I report directly and work with the National Land Imaging Program. And you know, we have had this long-term effort, and it doesn't seem to be ending, to look at the users, the uses, and value, mainly related to Landsat, but now obviously with different use from our users, with, you know, using combined Landsat and Copernicus and you know, different platforms, no longer just downloading from USGS Eros. It's added, you know, more pieces to how we go about some of these studies. So since about 2007, our group has been working with the National Land Imaging Program on trying to do these things. So we've kind of had these standard approaches where we use quantitative methods. So that is one nice thing, is we do have kind of this foundation of results and data out there. And in the past, and in 2017, we also did this economic modeling where we asked our users the value of Landsat. So we have kind of that baseline information. And there's been things that have happened over time that, you know, has changed with the free and open data policy, with new Landsats being launched. So all of these go into our new studies and new things that we have to figure out. The huge number of new users has added another layer to how we think about things. And and the different types of users that we now have. So we continue to use those quantitative studies, looking at economic modeling, looking at using such methods like stated preference to understand what our users would like in the next satellites. And then just kind of standard descriptive questions. How are they using Landsat, or how are they using Landsat in combination with other satellites? And our kind of counterpart to that, and I think a lot of you have mentioned this, is that those numbers are nice and very, very important. But we also want to know the user's story. So we do a lot of case studies where we take this deeper dive into our users and learn more about kind of the details of their use. And those also really connect with our user group. They connect with policymakers and decision makers. So those case studies have been really great. And I think similar to some of you have been mentioning, we've been trying to expand our user communication and work with different user groups. So we've formed a partnership with Ladies of Landsat. We've been working with underserved communities. A lady of Landsat, Nikki Tooley, is with the Navajo Nation, and we've been working with her on starting a needs assessment of Earth observation. We've been working with the Silva Carbon Program on gender barriers and forest carbon monitoring. So again, just trying to understand our expanded user group and continue some of those quantitative and qualitative methods as we move forward. The one part that has kind of been missing is that downstream value. So we've been working on a qualitative study to look at the Landsat data ecosystem. So kind of like looking at the network, right? So how does value get transferred? What are our value added products? What's missing within that ecosystem? What do our different users within that ecosystem think about trust and communication? So yeah, just so many things to think about with our very large and very different user group. So that's why this GeoValue group is so amazing, because we have a great group here to try to figure out these complex problems together.
We have a lot of problems, a lot of challenges to solve. I had a chance to read Lawrence's comment a bit better. Let's come on to it in a moment, but I see you were interpreting baseline information a slightly different way to I did, and certainly establishing that is critical and one of our challenges as well. So let's I'll take questions in a minute, but let's go to our final speaker, Alessandra Tassa from ESA. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So I will just to reintroduce myself. I work in the Earth Observation Directorate of ESA. ESA is the European Space Agency, and it's an intergovernmental agency composed of 22 member states. And the idea that we pull up the space capacities of the single member states to go beyond the capacities of the single country. And the member states are our stakeholders. In fact, if you going to your question about who are the main stakeholders to which we need to report, these are the representatives from our member states who sit regularly in their ministry representatives, and it's the ones to whom we propose our mission and to whom we report about the status of our missions. And in addition to this, we do have different types of cooperations. ESA has different types of activities which span from human space flights to launchers to telecommunications, but the Earth observation program is the largest directorate. And in this program, in this directorate, we have different programs related to different types of missions. From we build the satellites and which we hand over to partner agencies such as the meteorological satellites for EUMETSAT, and we also make our own programs with that we build satellites and operates, like Earth observation missions, and we have a partnership with the European Union on Copernicus, which is a flagship European Earth observation program. And in all these different missions, I think we can say that the stakeholders' interests are very different. So what we have learned is that when we want to demonstrate the benefits of all these types of missions, you might want to focus on different aspects. It's true that all the stakeholders are very sensitive to understand what is the return on the GDP or in terms of employment, which is a kind of now well known how to calculate this. The economists can picture this out almost straightforwardly, because there are many data with regards to the upstream and the downstream sector, but we increasingly tried to link this to the downstream users and to the end user benefits. And there are all the problems that all the panelists talk about, and which are maybe exacerbated by the fact that sometimes you do not know sufficiently the users. I would say now with Copernicus represented a quantum leap in Earth observation in Europe, because it really expanded the user base to a range that was never the case. But thanks to the free and open policy, the data are used in many different ways, and it's very difficult. We can say that we have quite some knowledge, but not so much about how the users are using the data and getting benefits from them. And so this is one of the exercises that we are increasingly trying to connect to the user base to get the returns on and understand how they're using the data and what are the main benefits that are derived from this data. And the description of these benefits, as I highlighted also in the previous session, can be very different because the benefits are very different. As an example, I can say that particularly for Copernicus, we are increasingly tying the benefits to the support to public policies, because for Copernicus, this is a key objective. And the support to public policies is not easily monetizable. So what we learned is that sometimes the motivation to use Earth observation data for public authorities is not at all economic, but it's really the possibility to do a better job with very evident and notable societal benefits. So indeed, it's a very complex exercise. We are trying to tackle this in many different ways, and there are top-down approaches that are related to top-down modeling of impact on the whole market sectors, and that we do, for instance, in the European Commission is doing this for Copernicus, but we also take the approach of the bottom-up studies, like the Sentinel Benefits 1, And we are convinced that we need the two, basically, because they respond to the needs of different stakeholders. And for instance, in particular for these bottom-up studies, they work quite well with respect to people, to different, really they go to the personal touch, and they do very nicely in explaining to people the link between the satellite data and the societal benefits. This approach also have some other advantages that are you connect better with the users because you understand better how the data are used, and so you can use this information also to improve the services on your own, which is what we are trying to do, and to reconnect this to our services. To try and improve the quality, the performances, but also I think this is an important aspect. This kind of studies act as a demonstrator, and they are a great engine to improve the user uptake. What we found is that users who are maybe reluctant, maybe public administrations who are reluctant in using maybe a complex, seemingly complex technology based on Earth observation data, they are very keen in listening about successful experiences. So exposing these success stories has indeed a great value. So I think that we increasingly tend to adopt this coupled approach, and we know that this is very complex. That's why I think it's evident from the panel that we have many commonalities in the challenges, and there is much interest in sharing these experiences. We learned very much also from the experiences from some of the other agencies. And we learned very much, just to mention one, from the Landsat experience. You first embraced the open and free data policy for Landsat, which is brought a very interesting pattern in the exploitation of Earth observation data. So that's why we sit also in the GeoValue meetings, and we are very happy to share these experiences.
Thank you, Alessandra. I'm happy to see some exchange in the chat, especially around the baseline information. I hope we can have the chance to come and discuss that a little bit further. But I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to ask the panelists first. And this question applies to anyone in the audience as well, who particularly those coming from an organization which is distributing data, a space agency, to articulate what it is they're looking for. So the question is, how do you think the activities of GeoValue could be tuned to improve the information being produced to help suit your needs? And I think we've had a number of pointers towards that as we've gone through the discussion. But let me explicitly put that question to each of our panelists in turn. So, well, I'll keep the same order. So, Lawrence.
So maybe I can comment on some of the challenges that we've sort of seen from a programmatic standpoint. And I'll list out three. One would be multidisciplinary work, sort of enabling that. Two would be the willingness of decision makers to engage. And the third would be sort of incentives and rewards. And so the multidisciplinary work, really, how do we help create the connections between the communities, between the social science economists with the natural physical scientists and all, in terms of the familiarity of knowledge, the respect for one another's fields, the extra time it takes for them to find one another and then work together to find topics. Certainly USAK showed and indicated some progress along this. The second challenge I would sort of identify was that the willingness of decision makers. So sometimes they're hesitant to engage. Sometimes the analysis might show that their decision was poor. And because of that, sometimes they're hesitant to be public about the results. So that's just something that's a reality of working in this field that we're having to address. And the third, I would say, is creating the incentives and the rewards. Economists have always say everything comes back, it starts and ends with incentives. And so how do we create the incentives, both in funding and recognition activities, to support work in this field so that we can really advance it and expand it? And rewards, could be places to publish. It can also be recognition of this multidisciplinary work in performance plans or the academic tenure process and all that. So we are trying to work this. You saw we put money into the Resource for the Future and Valuables. And I'm actually pleased to say that on Monday of this week, we announced a brand new call for proposals that both NASA and NOAA are doing together, with USGS involvement as well, for a new call to support even more work in this area. I'll put something in the chat related to that. But I realize it wasn't quite on your question, Jeff, but hopefully that provided some context for others, and maybe the others can address your question more specifically.
Thanks. It certainly provides some hooks, though. I mean, the multidisciplinary approach is something that we've discussed many times, and I think that's something I'm quite impressed in Valuables, that you've managed to bring, or RFF have managed to bring, different disciplines around the problem, and that's good. That's very good. So let me go now to Gustavo.
Okay, Jeff, I will share my screen to help me to answer your question. Are you seeing this? Okay. Are you seeing the slide?
Yes.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, we do.
Okay, no worry. So I think the most value benefit from our point of view in Peru is to get access to maybe methodologies, tools, models, so we may use it, especially for decision makers here. You can see here in the slide that this is how we have delivered data to our users according to the sectors in the center of the slide. The main sector demanding satellite data in Peru is disasters. This is natural, we expect that, followed by security and defense. But we think here, regional and local governments who are not a big user, so this is one of the less demanding users. In this sector, we think we may have the most benefits from this satellite system, because these local and regional governments now are not using remote sensing tools, and they may have a lot of applications in terms of, for example, cadastre or tracking main economic activities, make zonification, economic and ecological zonification, and also management of this information. So not only, when I said decision maker, I was referring not only to central government decision maker, because for sure we are also interested to deliver information to them so they may support the new investment in space infrastructure in the future. But also we would like to deliver this valuation information to local and regional decision makers, so they may use this data to their economic activities and territorial management. I think this will be the most useful information for us from this community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gustavo. So, James, you've been pretty active in the GeoValue community, so you know a bit what's going on. So, give us your view on what we could do additionally to what could be done additionally to help serve your needs.
Right. Well, absolutely, I would say, and I think it's already come across through some of the presentations, especially at the outset, that the GeoValue group has really done a lot of things that are incredibly useful. And I do think there is a lot of value there. into what we could do even more, which I'm almost hesitant to say, considering how busy it feels like we already are. But you know, one of the big challenges, and there are many, as has already been made clear too, but is in communicating this better, I think, and kind of telling the story. And so it is easy for things like Earth observation to sometimes seem a bit esoteric. And I think that what we can do in GeoValue in order to discuss kind of best practices, and I think non-monetary benefits is a key component of this too, is coming up with those ways that we're able to speak with a bit of a common language and come up with ways that this information can be communicated to decision makers, to the public at large, to demonstrate that value. And so there's a lot of work to be done on the more kind of quantitative side and coming up with all those things. But I know for our part too at the CSA, it is one thing, and it's very important to, example, have a space sector survey and to have all of that data on revenues, on workforce, et cetera, and demonstrate some of the value that way. But a key component, this kind of next step, which is really critical, is finding ways to communicate that. And sometimes it's as simple as having good infographics and easy to read reports. But I think from a GeoValue standpoint, that's definitely one of the next kind of elements to really tackle, is not just how can we measure it, which is already a huge challenge in and of itself where there's lots of work to do. But then the kind of next step of, once it is measured, how can we make sure that it's accessible to a broad audience and to decision makers to really help communicate why Earth observation is valuable. So that's kind of, I guess, the main sort of pitch I'll make in thinking about some of the stuff GeoValue can do, while also saying that, and easy for me to say as being relatively active in it too, especially recently, but saying that I think that we've made some great strides so far as well.
Thank you, James. Yeah, the communication came up in side events in the past, and we've certainly discussed about reaching out and establishing a community of communicators, as it were. But that could certainly be something that we could address going forward. Okay, so then for the same question, Samu.
Yes, yeah, what I'm going to say is exactly what James already mentioned about it.
Oh, okay.
Actually, really, communication is a quite challenge for us, actually. And then I would like, because I'm a new for the GeoValue, so that I would like to get to know about what's happening and what best practices you already have in the GeoValue about the communication to the societal economics value. Because every time we are trying to communicate with, for example, the Cabinet Office disaster monitoring, we passed on the satellite image before and after the disaster. And they would like to know what the information there. So we put on the radar sat images. They don't understand exactly about the synthetic aperture radar. So, oh, this is and dark and gray and image. What's happened? What the meaning about that? So that we need to, facilitate about understanding about what the meaning about that. So that's what happens in our ALOS data, which is same with the radar satellites. Radar information is quite difficult to understand. So I think transformation satellite data into the value-added information for disaster monitoring, climate change, or environment change, and still we need to some sort of a intellectual or terminology nomenclature issues between end user and then ourselves. So that we need to really a multidisciplinary work needs to be done, or maybe someone else to facilitate to interpret among us. So that's, I think, GeoValue, maybe, I think you already have some sort of best practice already that I would like to know. So then I think it might be a common challenges, but that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It sounds like you already asked the next question, which is, do you want to join the GeoValue community? So it sounds like you answered that one already. Okay, let me move on quickly to Marie.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, this was your most difficult question, because I think The reality is that you guys, this is a wealth of information and data that's available that is invaluable. In the work that we have been doing, we've been leveraging on what this group has been doing over decades, and it's really helped define. Yeah, so keep going. That's the point. It really is useful. But where I think, from our perspective, if you can look at adding anything, I think we've got the methodologies that's used and within the measurements of impact, of Earth observation is available. But I think there needs to be a stage where all of that again is really thought through and consolidated, again as a collective of what everybody is using, and just saying this is what we're using and this is why it works, because we need country comparable data to the rest of the world to show that what we're doing is actually what the rest of the world is also doing, and that would be brilliant, because we're on the non-romantic side of space. Nobody realizes that the benefit that they've got is actually space, and this is where the onus is on us again. And Alessandro, you touched on it, but the end user uptake, if we can up the communication, especially on what it actually means for the end user, that will be brilliant, because it comes, again, from a South African perspective, we don't own the satellites of the data that we're using. So a lot of what is already measured is to say, okay, so there's an upstream investment into building a satellite, it's launched, and this is, so you need to look at from a country perspective that does not necessarily own and operate the satellites, the data that they're using, because we need to address the same critical value factors that you guys need to address for your citizens, but there's a huge upstream part of it that's missing for us that don't own the satellites. I think that maybe that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. A little observation there, but our cases, we tend to put them in countries. We tend to put a border around the country and assess it for a country, and there are many reasons for that. But that touches on your need for something which is comparable, and trying to understand what is the difference. But we put a country there because it's a similar market, it's similar regulations, so it provides a coherent boundary for us to work, and it also helps in the communication, the marketing of the cases. Okay, so Krista.
Thanks, Jeff. I have similar thoughts to most of the panel, so I'll just be quick. But I think that looking at societal benefits and value within an EO data ecosystem is a wicked problem, right? So maybe the challenge to GeoValue is to figure out how to do that. For example, in the data ecosystem project that we're working on, our downstream end users that make decisions don't necessarily know that they're using EO data with the product that they have. So it's just an interesting conundrum on how to figure out value in those situations. So yeah, I think just kind of repeating what the whole panel has said, and yeah, someone figure that out.
Okay, so that's a challenge for all of us. Okay, Alessandra.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the others, because I really took many notes. I think I picked up some of the messages. For instance, Lawrence talked about incentives for users, and I think this is very intriguing. In my view, we are still lacking much information from the users, and as you said, Lawrence, sometimes it's difficult to have them contribute their own information. We found many people who are using the data, but maybe the end users, they don't really necessarily care about exposing the benefits that they derived from the use of Earth observation data. So my dream there would be really to find something that the magic formula that can get them contribute maybe spontaneously to declare how happy they are about the data. And we, in the workshop last week, the quote of the workshop was one end user from the icebreakers in the Baltic. He said, more pictures, please. Because they need, they really vocal about their need for the data. And I think that was so effective as a message. So in my, what I would hope is that we could, in GeoValue, get together to have a kind of a toolkit that could be reusable by the users, very robust, very trusted, so that it could be easy also for the users to really voluntarily contribute to the analysis and provide their input data. And so for me, one of the my objectives in GeoValue would be to really get some common guidelines that we could give to expose to or propose to practitioners or to the users. Another thing that you touched upon is the communication and the common language. And for instance, James, but also the others, the importance of communication. Now, to communicate about these benefits, I tell you, what from my point of view, what is really effective is to have the users as testimonials of the benefits, because they are the very trustable ones. So we really, to me, we really need to see how we can bring the users on board. And to me, this is really very challenging. But more than infographics, you can do whatever you want with movies and infographics. But the very effective thing is to have the users explain the benefits and be vocal about these benefits. And I think we very much need this also. So one of the things for GeoValue is also, maybe it was already touched upon, can we benchmark these benefits and provide a kind of common framework or understand how this analysis can be not so much intercompared, but I think, Jeff, you can confirm that there is so much value in contrasting the different cases, analyzing what is that makes a benefit in one area, a geographic area or market area, or in another. And it's really a valuable exercise. So from ESA, we are really very willing to hear about your own case, maybe try and compare not only the methodology, but the experience from the users, which may be very different, but sometimes, and very often, I would say, there are similarities. And I think if we can expose these similarities, we can even be more trustable with respect to our stakeholders. And okay, so I think we stop here because there are many points, but I guess that I can leave it here for the moment.
Okay, I'm going to let it run on a little bit. Craig confirms that we don't necessarily have a hard end time, but I guess people will have other things to go to, especially you guys in the US as it's Thanksgiving. Yeah, Alessandro, I can certainly confirm. I mean, I said at the beginning that you know, the cross-cutting analyses have assumed a bigger and bigger importance in what we're doing. And, you know, we put together a presentation recently that was given to the Copernicus User Forum about the benefits to the public authorities. And that was a really interesting exercise. The presentation, I think it's already available on the website, but if it's not, it will be. But that really introduced a lot more questions, but a really good look at how public agencies can benefit from the use of EO, and you know, most of them and the soft benefits. We've been around the block. I think the last element we wanted to discuss was what next. Before getting there, though, let me just say, if there's anybody in the audience who wishes to come in and contribute, please feel free to do so. Put your indication in the chat. I'm just trying to look for the raised hands. There we go. So if anyone wants to raise their hand to come in, please do so. We'd welcome comments from other agencies. Okay, so there's no immediate response. So let me just finally then go with the panel. There are a number of things we've discussed within GeoValue as being sort of next steps, and this is rather more short term than long time. We've had a number of ideas coming out in discussion, but some suggestions around putting new different content to be added into the repository. There was some encouragement for that coming through earlier. We've tried to organize a series of workshops. Should we organize a workshop next year? Currently, we've been talking about it. We planned to organize one last year, but the COVID rather prevented that, but we had a virtual workshop. Are there different themes for case examples that people would like to see? Is there some guidance there? Are people have bandwidth to different case examples? We're thinking about webinars, having short 1 hour webinars. One of the things that came out in our workshop last week, we had a sort of 10 hours, I think, of a workshop, which was, it was spread over 2 days, so it was manageable, but we realized that we could have broken it up into the short chunks, which it was, because there were case studies and panels, and we could hold those all separately. The fact that we're working virtually means that people are not sort of committed to going to a meeting, so we can have short meetings over the in remote conferences. But people miss physical meetings as well, so I think it will be good if we can get together again next year. So anybody who's interested to organize or host a meeting next year, then please be in contact. I'm going to stop there and ask my fellow comrades from GeoValue to come in and provide any specific comments they think. Jay, you joined later and you've been very quiet, so perhaps you want to say something, or perhaps you want to sort of take the last word.
Thanks, Jeff. This has been a real pleasure, and the fact that we are seeing a lot of commonality among the different agencies, among the different panelists, whether it's in user stories or communication, or having ways to develop vocabulary so people commonly understand things. These are all important steps going forward. And I think that we need to take this opportunity and encapsulate it into a series of specific actions. And then I would suggest that those of us that were on the panel express either their interest or their willingness to participate with us in moving these a few steps further so we can engage the broad community. With that, Jeff, I wanted to thank you and Alessandra and Francoise and all of the folks for putting this together. Every time I think it's another webinar, I end up learning things, and this has been very valuable. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Excuse me. Any other comments to come in? Invitation there from Jay to join the community. Those who are not part of the GeoValue community at the moment, please do indicate if you wish to join. We talk about a workshop. We have virtual events. There are the working groups. You can contribute into the repository. So there are many ways in which to get involved in the current setup, notwithstanding some of the new ideas that we've heard today. So I think maybe I could. One of the comments that came out very early on, and we're sitting here in the Geo event, is a Geo perspective on this, and I wonder, is Steve still in the audience? If I can put him on the spot.
Or Craig.
And yes, Craig.
Yeah, you might ask Craig.
Hi.
Turn from
I was
host
trying
to
to,
speaker.
yeah, I was trying to add Stephen on there, but unfortunately we seem to have met our limit for that. So, just to come back on this, your question again, you were looking for a secretariat perspective.
Yeah, Geo's perspective and how we can engage more with Geo, how Geo can engage more with this community.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to respond. One of the things that I would start by saying is that I attended the session that you held in the Canberra Geo Week, and I'm actually quite impressed by the amount of work that's been done by this community. I mean, it just seems to be building and building and reaching out to a much broader set of participants each time I hear from it. So, and that even under the circumstances of the pandemic and so on. So I congratulate you on what you've been able to bring together. One of the things that I would suggest here, and it certainly came up in some of the discussions that you've had, is this idea of some practical tools that you can share with the community. I think a lot of our work program activities are struggling with this issue of how do we measure or communicate the value that the individual activities are having. And it's not, of course, in this respect, limited to space-based observations, but it's really the gamut of activities that are being done in the Geo Work program. But the fact that you've given this a lot of thought, and you've developed some methodologies, you've developed some approaches that have been working. And in this regard, I mean, there's lots of stuff that came out in this session, but certainly what was in the video in terms of that range of kinds of impacts that you're looking at and how you go about doing that in those different areas, I think would be really beneficial for the Geo community. It's also something I would say from the Geo Secretariat standpoint, we're always looking for ways to tell that value story in our communications from the Secretariat. This, of course, is connected very closely to resource mobilization for us. We're trying to find ways to and new sources for funding, going beyond our members, but perhaps looking at philanthropies or for large international or intergovernmental organizations that provide funding. But the trick here is always to demonstrate that our activities are realizing that value. So I think having a closer relationship with this community here on the Geo Value community with the Geo Secretariat, I think is becoming much more important as we go forward.
Thanks. Jay, you're trying to speak, you're on mute.
Yeah, Craig, that's a very nice summary. I would also be interested in the guidance from the Secretariat and also key members from different agencies in Geo, as to which of the various programs within Geo would be receptive to participating with us. So basically a help in creating a marriage. And I think one pilot case would speak 1,000 words. So maybe it's that we could work with you and with, I know Lawrence represents US Geo to a certain level. We could get guidance to engage in the next year or year and a half in a collaborative effort.
That sounds really promising. Certainly, I mean, the first place that we would point to would be our flagships and our other more mature initiatives where they actually have services that are going out to a lot of users already. I'll also mention here, we have a secondment, a part-time secondment from ITC that's just starting up, which is focused on impact assessment and in terms of working with work program activities to help them prepare impact plans. So I think one starting point that I would take away from this is we should connect you with the secondee. It's actually Joost Teuben from ITC that's doing this, who was working on capacity development and of course has a strong background in that. But I think linking up your community with Joost would be a first step. And then we should, and it was already in his plan that we would be communicating with those flagships and initiatives anyways to talk about this very issue. So I think this works very well for us.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Jay. We're coming to the end, I think. Everyone's probably a bit tired after 2 hours. Any last minute comments from anyone? Throw the floor open. In other words, well, in any case, I think that was a good place to stop. That was a good conclusion. So sorry if I seem to have taken over the floor. That wasn't intended, but I just carried on as moderating the panel. So thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for your participation. Thanks to the audience who've sat through us. We had a good audience listening to our discussion. I think it was a great discussion. A lot of good points. And we need now to go away and think about some of those and work out what we do. Thanks everyone. Have a good day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well,